Hey everyone, welcome back to Make the Music. I've got Nick Burgess on with me here from Nick Burgess Recordings. We're going to talk about his journey to kind of making a recording almost a full-time thing and how he's worked to improve. He's really has amazing sounding modern metal mixes. And so in the description, I'll have where you can work with him, where you can hear his stuff and his band Dark Harbor. They just released their stuff last year, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think
Awesome.
it was, what was it, like maybe July or something. I can't
Yeah.
even remember when it came out.
Yeah, it's EP
Yeah.
Snakeskin, right? Is what the EP is called.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds incredible, so you guys should check it out there. Anyways, we're just going to kind of let him talk about, he might even pull out a session here and break down some of the aspects of that now that he has his computer working properly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
Um,
crazy journey. I've got two external hard drives now to prevent that just file situation from happening again. That was
that's
insane.
really smart. Yeah, because you do not want to lose files. That is the worst, the worst nightmare there. Why don't you just start in and talk about how you got into this recording thing? Like everyone has a story about why they start getting into it. And so just kind of launch in. How did you get into this thing? How did, what did you watch? How did you improve? And then how have you gotten to the point where you are now? So just go ahead.
Yeah, totally. I guess it was, I mean, as far as like when I first got like a DAW, I think it was like 2012 or so. I remember my brother got me a copy of Studio One, and I barely knew how to use it. But every time I wanted to do creative ideas, I would start to dabble in it and like learn a little bit more. And then eventually, I like did a couple of like little demos here and there with like an acoustic and a vocal because that's like the easiest thing to do. So I just did that for a while, and I was in a pop punk band in 2016. It was called With Roots Above, and it was kind of like Yellow Card, but then we threw in some like easy core and stuff like that too. So it was fun. And we ended up going to a studio where we had like a single done, and we were really happy the first time. But I really enjoyed like just kind of watching the recording process. And the next time that we ended up going to the same studio, we weren't really happy with the songs. It was almost like a different person had touched them. So we weren't happy with the mixes, and like they were already done, and we weren't able to go back into the studio because the band I was in, like we were poor, and so I was like, well, I'm just gonna like get an interface and like learn how to do this stuff. And so I was really really bad. I didn't have any training, and I got like a Focusrite 18i20
Oh, wow.
second gen. It's still what I use now. It's the same interface. I haven't upgraded
Good.
it.
It's good stuff.
Um,
I
yeah,
mean, for this interview, I'm using a solo. Yeah, it's second gen solo. So
nice. Yeah, I mean the preamps don't really like. I don't think they matter nearly as much as people make them out to. Like I'd be happy to upgrade it eventually, but I feel like we're talking about like 10%, like 5% difference here. It's really not
yeah.
that much, especially when you mix and everything else. Um, but I ended up, trying to make some demos on the Focusrite, and the first client that I actually got was site received, and that
There we
was
go.
when like I first started recording. It was with site received, and so your band, and I started like
Yep.
I think the first time we recorded drums, it was like in a basketball. No, it sounded like a basketball. The kick drum sounded like a basketball, but we recorded in like this
Nice.
little church office because we didn't have anywhere else to like record the drums, and there was like glass everywhere, and it was awful. But like first couple like recordings with site received just completely bombed. Like they're really really bad because I didn't know what I was doing. But like the band was like comfortable having me come on because like we were at similar levels of like experience and skill, and so like it was just a really good learning opportunity. And so I kind of just like kept cutting my teeth from like recording like that first album for Sight Received. And then we ended up outsourcing mixing to Nick Olson for that. But then after that, I kind of kept dabbling with recording. I still was really into it. Didn't know if I was going to keep going with it because I was getting really frustrated. And COVID hit, and I had a lot of time to really work on it. And when I got my stimulus check, I saw that there was a course from Hardcore Music Studio.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that
Yeah.
too, because you know, you're basically a disciple, I should say, of Jordan, right? At this point.
I got to learn a lot from him for sure. But the course, it was like, it was enough that I was able to buy the course and get some sound treatment. The same panels that I have now, I ended up getting those, and I just learned from Jordan's online courses, and it was really really helpful. It gave me like tracks where I could actually hear like this is what a good guitar tone sounds like. These are what your drums should sound like when you mic them up, and just getting to that point of knowing what the source track should sound like went a long way with actually getting a better mix.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
at the start you're just kind of getting into it and it's just all this new exciting stuff. And then you
yeah,
realize how bad you are. And then that like moment
yeah,
of depression hits, you're like, I'm bad and I don't know how to get better, you know?
yeah. No, totally. Yeah, and that's definitely like what it was with that was like the more I just started to record and mix and take things out to my car and just the frustration of like why does it sound like this here and then it sounds different in my car and going back and forth and back and forth. But like with Jordan's courses, there's like tutorials and like follow along videos where you can literally like follow along and copy his moves as he's doing them and stuff. So it's like it's probably like as close to like over the shoulder as you could get with like an internship without actually being in person. Like to me it was very helpful to be able to do that. So I just kept doing that, and then I started recording more bands. And so like my second client was Favism, and they're like
Yeah,
yeah, you know
I've played
them.
with
They're
them. Yeah, I've played with
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah, they're like a hardcore like metalcore type thing. But yeah, really good people. So I worked with them, and then just kind of from there, it was like if there was a band that was a similar genre, I started getting more people to reach out, and they'd be like, "Oh, hey, we heard you do Favism. We kind of want to sound like Favism. Can you work with us?" And so it's kind of like a breadcrumb type thing,
Yeah.
like you leave the breadcrumbs from working with this band or this band, and eventually those bands will reach out and start working with you too.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you got clients by leaving your house and being a part of local music scenes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's a big thing too. And so like if you play in a band, it can kind of be like it can be like I don't know if I want to say marketing strategy because that sounds kind of weird, but like
The
it's true.
gateway. Yeah.
Like you play in the scene and you build relationships with people, and then they're like, "Oh, I love your band's EP. Who did it?" And then you're like, "Oh, I actually did it." And
Yeah.
it opens up the conversation. Definitely.
And so going into like the early 2020s, and then I mean 2022 was the next site received EP, right? But you probably did projects in between that,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of site received stuff that I did, because I also did like the acoustic EP,
Hmm.
and then like the Roots covers. I did those, so it was all like a really good opportunity to cut my teeth.
Yeah.
And then I would say, oh, my pop punk band, I ended up getting the stems from that stuff, or the multi tracks, I should say, from the producer. And so then from that point, I just kind of practiced mixing on
Yeah.
those, So it was a good opportunity. And when you're in hardcore music studio stuff, like you get tracks from like Silverstein and like all these different bands, and so it's cool because like when tracking is done right, it sounds so close to like a like almost
Yeah.
finished product that
Yeah.
the mixing you might be doing a lot in the mixing, but it's not like, oh, like this sounded like crap and then I turned it into this. Like that's just
Yeah.
not really how mixing works. Like if that ever does happen with the mix, it's because there's heavy sample replacement. Like
Right.
yeah, like I absolutely hate like if you've ever seen like the ads and it's these guys like I saw this one for pop punk and I can't remember what the company name was, but it's basically like, oh, like we didn't know what we were doing and so we bought this pop punk template and now we don't have to go to a mixing engineer or to like a recording engineer, and it was just
Oh my God.
like you're missing it. Like you can't just buy like the perfect preset
Hmm.
and then you're good to go. It just doesn't work
Nope.
that way. So
Yeah. I feel like the most work that is done from those like raw sessions to a final mix is the drums usually take the most care.
yeah.
Sometimes drums are recorded, incredibly well, but I feel like most of the time that's going to be a lot of your mileage. And then but most of the time the bass and guitar tones are usually really well done. And then the vocals sound really clean. And so it's more about like, how can I balance all these elements? How can I make the mix exciting? How can I add automation to really make it feel like a journey, and get everything clear as opposed to how do I fix this thing? Right.
Right, right. Yeah. I like what like something that Jordan would talk about with the mix is like it should almost be like invisible of like the mix shouldn't be like so bad that it's distracting, but also like you shouldn't be pulling all of these crazy things out that like all people are paying attention to is the mix. Like basically like your job is to enhance the song and to bring out the message of like what's in it, you know? Like
Yeah,
if you've got these
100.
drum samples that sound like cannons, but like people can't understand the lyrics, then
Missing the point. Yeah, missing the
yeah,
point.
exactly. Yeah.
No, that what would you say your range of genres is for in terms of you producing, mixing, and mastering?
I would say probably like any sort of rock to metal.
Okay,
I keep getting a lot of like hardcore and metalcore stuff, but that's kind of just because of like what I started out recording, and
sure.
so it's just the breadcrumbs from that. But pop punk is probably where I have like the most knowledge and experience.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
I feel like there is a overrepresentation of education regarding like metal and metalcore and heavy music mixing
yeah,
on the internet. And I don't know why it's that genre, maybe because it's just so difficult to mix or there's a lot of self-starters in that genre.
yeah,
But I feel like even when I started looking for information, it was all modern metal.
yeah.
So it's very interesting to me that that's the case.
I think maybe it's kind of linked to like the periphery sort of thing because
Yeah.
I know that they're like if you think about it like them and their team and like Nolly Get Good and stuff like that kind of circle is very like largely responsible for like home recording getting as good as it has. Like
Yeah.
if you think about like Get Good drums with the modern and massive shit and like oh what else is there? Like I mean
Yeah. No,
guitar
and all
recording solutions, amp sims,
Axe
like how to make it
effects, yeah,
sound good. Yeah.
JST, all that stuff. Yeah, no, true.
Yeah.
Um, no, yeah, and because I remember if you look up, you basically see like Misha videos about him recording his own stuff. And definitely back in like 2014, that was a little more like, whoa, you can like track your own stuff at home. That's very interesting. I think a lot of
Right.
people were definitely interested in that. And then, you had sort of you had channels that were not doing metal stuff, but then you kind of had Nail the Mix and Jordan and sort of these channels start to pop up teaching stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's what actually got me into modern. I never listened to any modern metal music. I had no clue what it was.
Oh
But
dang.
it was the recording stuff that got me into it, which is really interesting. So I have a kind of
Yeah.
unique avenue into it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the first metal band like modern metal band I started, like I love 80s thrash stuff, but like is like Periphery. It was like the first modern metal band I ever really heard. So
Yeah.
just because of the recording tip stuff.
That's
Um,
cool. It's got
yeah,
that shiny, like kind of technical sound to it too, which is cool.
right.
And
Oh,
like yeah.
I still love Periphery 3. It's still one of my favorite albums.
Nice.
Um, although I'm a little sick of if I hear modern and massive drum samples again, I think I might just lose it because I know I'm like, there's modern and massive again. Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
you get those feelings or like the Easy Drummer 2 stock kit. Like when I hear that in people's demos, I'm like, stop. Don't
Yeah.
use the stock, please. Don't use
Yeah.
the stock kit from Easy Drummer 2.
Yeah. I think what makes it more noticeable is when people just like pick a preset, which like if you think about it, like when it comes to people that are mainly just writing, like, they're probably getting like the aggressive rock kit from GGD, or something like that. And they're just going to pick a preset and they're going to be good to go. And they're going to pull up their neural DSP, the archetype Nolly, and they're going to click on a preset that sounds good. And they might tweak it a little bit, but they're not going to change it too much.
Yeah.
And, but by the time you get through that, like what you've come through is a very like recycled like sound because everybody else has access to these tools, but like a lot of people aren't always learning to become like an engineer in it. They're just like, cool, I'm an engineer. I've got these presets that I can load up. And I use presets too, but like, you know, I will move it until it's doing what I want it to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Like when I do my videos, I do my match the sound videos, I will use Superior Drummer 3, but by the time the kit is done, it's an alien kit. I mean, there's pieces
yeah.
from everywhere. I've got samples from stuff. Just to like you know when a kit sounds stock. Or as an
Yeah,
engineer, like you kind of can just read it out. And I feel like
yeah,
even less with guitar tones, where it's like, okay, people have been miking Marshalls with vintage 30s forever. Like no one really
yeah,
has a problem with that. Mesa, PV 5150, everyone knows that sound. But like a drum, ripping drum samples is more distinctive, in my opinion,
yeah.
almost.
I think so too, for sure. You can kind of tell, especially if you listen through a producer's work, that they're using the same drum samples on like every mix. So
Joey Sturgis early
yeah,
stuff. No, but that's not just him. I mean, yeah, people do that for sure. Um,
yeah,
I'm obsessed with the Taylor Larson pack snare. Like I'm just absolutely obsessed with that snare. It's a problem. Let's just say that. But um, what one thing I want kind of your take on. We've discussed this
yeah,
before. I
yeah.
did a video on responding to kind of Jordan has an opinion on using the grid.
Oh yeah,
Um, and I think for modern metal context, I totally get where he's coming from. Like things are quantized. That's just the sound of the genre. But I feel like we're experiencing an issue where now that everything sounds quantized, drummers are coming up hearing quantized things, and so they don't know how to play things unquantized. So when they come in, people are like, "Oh, we have to quantize it because drummers don't know how to play with feel." And it's like, yeah, because that's all they're hearing. We're getting some
mm,
feedback loop, and to me, it's just making stuff sound very similar. Like it's like the genre is not really able to move forward because everything is very locked into these sounds. I want your opinion on that because I have an opinion of my own because
yeah.
I sort of have roots in music that is pre-DAW. Not that I have a problem with tempos and maps and things like that, but I do feel like it's stunting the genre in a way.
Sure, yeah. I think uh, I think maybe the composition of the drums is maybe even more important than that because if we're just doing the same blast beats and the same boop got, like like we're not really presenting anything like unique or interesting. Um, so I guess that's what I would say as far as that goes. Like, um, I think it's a very helpful measurement tool when you have things on the grid because when you're recording the rest of the band, like when all the transients hit together, it really just makes things slam together.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like to me, that's a big thing is that when things are tight and together, they sound more punchy. And so a producer is like basically always going to favor that unless there's something where it's like, no, it's intended to be this way because there's this creative thing. Like I know that I think Nolly said that like on the newer Periphery record that there's like specific parts where the drummer was like, no, 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 I don't want this edited because it's intended to be this way, or it's
Mhm.
intended to pull the listener in this direction. From a perspective of working with local bands, most of the drummers that I get are not
Yep.
at that level of no, I
True.
intended for it to be this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually I'm getting blast beats and I'm like, it sounds like you were doing like 30-second note triplets, or that's what you were trying to do, but like it's just like all over the place. And so I have
Yeah.
to take like a little button on my MIDI and just program the triplets myself.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to just reprogram it. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think there is a big difference between like working with the best drummers out there,
Yeah.
and Luke Holland or something like that, right? And
Yeah,
then,
totally.
what you're gonna get as an engineer at the local level, which is just most of the time just less talented musicians.
Yeah.
And you have to make it work and you have to edit it. I will shout out our engineer Colton for the Sight Received record. He's amazing at
Yeah.
editing and he really understands editing and it makes a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
Um, if
No, it
you have
sounds great.
guitar takes that are not in time, not hitting with the kick and the snare right, I mean that is distracting stuff. That's going to be an issue. So that's not even what I'm commenting on.
Sure.
I've gone back to songs recorded in the 90s and 80s and I've quantized them. I'm working on a video for this
Yeah.
and the difference is just massive for the feel and swing of it. So
Oh
it's like I
yeah.
almost feel like I'd like to have some feel and swing back would be nice, but you're right. You need the musicians who are talented enough to actually do that.
Right, yeah. And that's the biggest thing. I think maybe we're getting people that rely more heavily on computers for things to be done well, like there's less people that are just like I'm going to make this a really good performance. There's more people that are saying I'm just going to fix it in post afterwards.
Yeah.
And when you get to that level where you get like mediocre playing and then you're fixing it with heavy editing, like it is like 100% taking the soul out.
Yeah. vocalists,
Yeah.
I'm looking at you with tuning, and I'm guilty of this as well because that's people's
Yeah.
ears are so attuned to perfect sounding pitch that it's kind of you're in a tough spot with that.
Hmm.
But I almost feel like if you tune too much, it's like bye bye life in the vocal almost. But it's a
Yeah.
tough balance.
Oh yeah. No, it definitely is because it's like you need. I guess when we're thinking about making music, we're making something that people are gonna have like an emotional connection to. And when you take out the emotion, by let's say you take a swing out of a vocal where they scoop up to a note, maybe that's a part of their emotion is the way that they work their way up to that note. So yeah, I guess maybe it's a subjective thing, but I know for me it's something I really pay attention to whenever I edit vocals. Is I really try not to like roboticize them too much.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
you probably know this from experience. A vocal that has feel and the emotion and just what you're going for, but it's slightly out of tune and there was a sound in the background is much better than a static robotic performance of whatever that line was, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because
Yeah.
that's like the job of the vocalist is like to carry the emotion
Hmm.
of the song. And I would say the same thing for like other instruments too, of like, okay, if something was a little wonky in this spot, but it provided a certain emotion or a certain feeling,
Yeah.
like I'm still gonna prefer that. Like, did you hear the newest Sum 41 record by
I've heard
chance?
a little bit of it. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. There's like some notes where he's like in a drop tuning and he's hitting the string so hard that you can hear the string go boing boing when it's being hit.
Hmm.
But like it's still like resolving to where it needs to. And I guess, maybe he calculated that out so it's going to work with the rest of the band and what's happening. But like normally for me, I'd be really careful about that because I'm working in really low tuning sometimes and like we need the note to be solid and we're like in drop A sharp or something like that.
Yeah.
But in his instance, like it sounded really cool and it just sounded aggressive and emotional. And it's like I could visualize him just like slamming on the guitar, and it again, like it kind of does take away from that when you
Yeah.
roboticize things too much.
That's an amazing
There's a
example.
balance for sure.
Yeah, that's an amazing
Thanks.
example. Like, I watched a video of Bob Clearmountain. He broke down Born in the USA. Bruce's guitar part is like he's striking the string so hard, like it is like probably a quarter step sharp the whole time. But the song is so angry and grungy that it's like perfect. It's like slightly out of tune
Right.
with the other guitar, and it's just like gives you this uneasy feeling, and then that is perfect. It's exactly what the
Right.
song needs. In pop
Right.
punk, you
That's what
probably
you
get a
want
little
it to
bit of that.
do.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah.
I think
It gets
so.
tricky.
Do you track your vocalists when you produce the records? I assume you want control over that aspect of the project.
Oh, do I track the vocalists like whenever
Yeah.
I like produce records?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm actually like pretty picky. But I'm more picky about the pitch and the performance than I am. No, sorry, not pitch. I'm more picky about the timing and the energy than I am about the pitch
Yeah.
because
Uh,
the pitch can be nudged as long as it's
yes.
close. I can work with it.
Right.
But
How do you set the
I'm listening
mood?
a lot more for like inflections of a
Mm,
vocal.
yeah.
How do I set the mood?
How do you get, because I feel like
Hmm.
vibe when going to record
Uh,
vocals is super important. Like how do you get the vocalist in that space where like he's ready to really give that good performance? I feel like a lot of people don't understand or kind of miss that aspect of it.
yeah, yeah. I think like a big part of it is like just kind of getting to know the person and build the relationship. Like, if you don't know them already, like a good place to start is always like, two positives and a negative. Like, tell them what they're doing well and then, say what could be better. And then there's some people that are just going to want you to be honest of like, yeah, that wasn't it. Like, let's go again. And so it depends on the person. There's some people that want the blunt honesty because they're going to be more secure and comfortable giving their best. And then there's going to be the people that like, you kind of have to butter them up a little bit so that they're more
Hmm.
willing to take your criticism. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a part of like knowing that person. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting to know that person in the middle of things. But we'll do just like a few bars at a time. And then like building up confidence, like if you make like a rough mix of the vocal, just like if you have like some EQ and some compression and maybe a little bit of delay on it, like it's gonna help them feel more comfortable because it sounds like they're polished and in the studio, and it's not gonna sound like just this raw vocal mic that is boring
Yeah.
and
I always track vocals through plugins. I have to. You want to feel like that's the final take, not like, well, it sounds good. We'll see what happens when I throw stuff on it.
yeah, exactly. Like most people, I've actually heard some people do this, which I think is crazy. But like, in most instances, I wouldn't have a guitar player come over and then just say, "Yeah, we're just gonna record your DI."
Yeah. What?
Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
like,
that's
can you
crazy.
imagine? Like, it would just take all the feeling out of it. Like, I've heard of certain producers that they do that because they're listening so closely to like the timing and the pitch, and I just think it's crazy. I
Yeah,
wouldn't want to
that's
do that.
ridiculous. What is your top tips for when you have a band and you're recording guitarists and maybe their skills don't align with the riff they're trying to track or the solo they're trying to track or whatever? What are your tips for like getting point A to point B and getting it to work?
Sometimes I just go to the end of the song and I change the tempo and I have them practice like in the studio. Like it can be a little awkward, but it's just like, yeah, like this isn't it. And I'll like solo the track and I'm like, you got string noise here. This is happening here. We need to take it over here and play it slow. And if like I'll just keep dropping it down more and more until they can actually like when they can really play it fluently, then we'll work from there. And it's like, okay, got it at that tempo. You almost have to be like their guitar teacher, and like, and then
Yeah.
you just gradually bring it up like a few BPM, gracefully, of course, but just kind of doing that. And once they can do it cleanly, then, maybe you can go back to the take and then you could punch it in. But in the extreme situations where maybe they can't actually play it up to speed, if you turn on like a time stretching feature, you can have them play the song like over at a slower tempo, and then when you drag it back over, it'll actually be in tempo with the song.
I thought you were about
Um,
to say then you track it.
yeah, yeah.
Then
um,
you
Sometimes, but like especially if it's like a lead part, like I'm not that good,
yeah.
like like
No.
I can play lead guitar, but like I'm not like a proggy guy that's able to shred and sweep pick and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So like, you know, just kind of do the best that I can with that. I
No
think
one
I've
get
had a couple of people where I did like re-record some things myself, but like most of the time I just get them to do it.
yeah. Um when the guitarists have not recorded themselves, I feel like that's like because when you begin recording and you record yourself guitar, you're like, wow, my timing is way worse than I thought. I have all this string noise. I
Yeah,
can't hit three
totally.
notes in a row without clunking. When the guitarist is just playing the band setting and they've never recorded themselves, I feel like that's where it's like the biggest shock for them because they realize how little or how much they have to go in terms of clean playing.
Yeah,
Like
no,
string noise
totally.
is a thing. Like when you pick that chord and, all three strings have to be in tune or whatever, or,
Yeah.
all the various tips that go along with that, that can be challenging because that can be a bruised ego situation for sure.
Oh yeah, especially if they played for a long time and like, you play with your buddies all the time, or you've been in a serious band for a while but you haven't like invested in good recording, like you just don't know to look for those things until someone else tells you. And
Yeah.
I had the same situation where like I actually became a way better guitar player when I got more into recording because
Yes.
I became way more aware of like my mistakes and like the
Mhm.
things that I was doing wrong. So like producing actually helped me get better at like both guitar and singing. Like it was very helpful
Oh,
with that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've only learned to sing while being into recording. So I didn't sing at all before that. So I feel like that almost helped me get better quicker because you realize like your pitch sucks like a lot. Put the tuning plugin on, nothing's even close. And it's like a very direct feedback almost to
Yeah.
be like, and I feel like you would experience that well recording vocalists. They realize that maybe they sing really quiet, their pitch is not nearly as good as they thought it was.
Yeah.
What are some of those experiences that you've had where you're kind of having to coach the vocalist almost?
Sometimes it's been like I've had a couple of people actually that like had not really sang before coming in, and it would be almost like a mini like vocal coaching type thing of like, open your mouth more, try these things, let's warm up in this
Wow.
way. Which was it was a lot of work, but we were able to get to a point that like they listened back and were like, wow, I can't believe that that's me. But yeah, it can definitely be a challenging situation. Most of the time, what I get, because I'm working with a lot of screamers, is people that maybe aren't always doing things in time. And so we have to stop and break things down because I'm like, yeah, you're rushing this line, like, or you're dragging this one, or like you're taking a breath here. And so what's happening is you're coming in a beat late and then you're trying to catch
Yeah.
up with the rest of your spot.
Especially when you're trying to track doubles and layer the vocal, it's like the timing's even more important because or else you got
Mhm.
all the transients are just out of control.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, you can always make like an example track. Sometimes I've done that when like a screamer was not able to like figure out the rhythm that I was showing them, or a singer wasn't able to do the melody. I would just go and like do it myself and then show them and go, okay, this is the track. I'm going to loop it a couple times, like practice with this track, and then we'll punch
Yeah.
you in on it.
Yeah. I want people to
Yeah.
notice. So, like, you're a mix engineer, but notice how much of our conversation is about coaching people to get the best performance because that's what really matters, right? It's like, it's almost
Yeah.
like 80% of the work is like getting a good tone at the source, of course, like having the right
Yeah.
mic, having the right space. But
Yeah.
if the performance sucks, it's a non-starter. It's over. You're not going to
Yeah.
get a good recording.
Yeah, totally. Like mixing engineers are not like wizards.
Yeah.
I mean, like you can definitely put a lot of good work into like make an awesome mix, but like if you don't have a good song or you don't have like good performances, then it's not gonna matter. Like I've even seen people that they record everything themselves and like the guitars are out of tune and the vocals are out of time and there's like reflections in the room because they used like a large diaphragm condenser microphone in their bedroom without any sound treatment, and so there's like a natural reverb that's happening, and as soon as you turn up compression and the mix and everything, all
Yeah.
that stuff is just pulled up. And
It's
so
like
like yeah.
you don't want to say it, but you're like, it's almost better if we just start over.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
we kind of need to like do this all over again.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. What I feel like a big problem is like when people record their own stuff, I'm talking about vocals.
Yeah.
For some reason, there's dumb advice out there. You need to be a foot away from the mic. I I feel like that is the dumbest advice that whenever I record vocals, I'm like this close. I don't know what you feel, but like that just removes any reflections is gone.
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
roll out low end. You can always roll off low end. Like I feel
Totally.
like in there's almost no circumstance where it's like there was too much low end in the mic and it was over. But
Yeah.
it's like you can get rid of that. You getting rid of room reflections is basically impossible. And even if you do, it's going to sound phasey and weird.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I feel that way too of like I'd rather have like more than less. I mean, if it's like obviously really boomy, then that's another situation we can talk about, but like I use this microphone for like all of my vocals. Like every vocalist that comes through just uses this. And you can eat it, you know? It's
Hmm.
it's totally it's meant for that. And I've heard of people like I've had people come in that were like, "Oh wow, like when I like came in to record with this guy, he was saying I needed to like back up because I was like making the microphone clip and like I was doing this and that." And like of course
Turn down
you
the
want to
gain.
watch
Turn
out.
down the turn down the
Right.
input gain if it's clipping. My gosh.
Right, totally. I did have like a couple of screamers that were so loud that they still clipped it with the input gain all the way down. But yeah, but
On a,
rather
on a
than
SM
having them,
on a SM58.
yeah, yeah. Oh, this is a 7B right here.
Oh, I
SM7.
mean, excuse me,
Yeah,
SM7B.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's really loud.
It's crazy. Like they're super super loud screamers, and so but rather than saying oh back way up, I mean I did have one guy that he like backed up a little bit, but not a lot. But like basically the approach was okay, well if it clips, we're just gonna do it again because getting the energy of the performance right and getting your plosives like up close and intense, like I want the compressor to have the meter like down the whole time that
Yeah,
I've got that scream coming through, because it
exactly.
literally needs to be squeezing out every little bit of energy. And when someone is way back here and you've got all this room sound that's coming through and the vocal sounds thin suddenly because you made them back up, like it just doesn't work,
Yeah,
you know?
because like I'll record into a condenser um in this room here, which is not very reverberant. But I'll have the pop filter like that far from the mic, and then like I'm up on the pop filter, and that's like your security to make sure like yeah, you don't get a crazy big plosive or
Sure.
something that ruins the performance.
Right.
But it's like I feel like it's almost this mythology of vocal recording where it's like, oh, you're a foot away, and then you back up on louder lines, and you get closer on other lines, and you got your
Mhm.
headphones, and it's just like, I'm like this is like the worst way to get people to get the best performance, in my opinion. Like that's just a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah. And when you're thinking about things like that, you can't give your best energy because you're more worried about making the sound engineer mad, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like I literally had a guy that he came through and uh he was trying to figure out what to do with the microphone, and he's like trying to get close enough and everything, and I was like, "Oh dude, honestly, like if you want, you can just like put your hand on the microphone, like it's not going to hurt it." And he was like, "Oh, dang, like this other guy that like he was like a bigger name that's like recorded people in the area, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, like don't touch my microphone." I'm like, "This isn't like a super expensive microphone. This is like $400 at most."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Chill
like
out.
yeah. And your job as like, the producer and the engineer, like, is to coax out the best performances of the people that you're with and to make really good art. And like you can't do that if everyone's on their tiptoes and like afraid that, they're gonna piss you off. Like
Right.
it's just not doable.
It's almost a part of the mythology of the big recording studio, right? Where it's like, don't touch anything, and like everyone's like super anxious, and it's like that's not a good way to get a solid performance at all. And I also feel like people are so scared of like, well, what if we have to re-record it? Oh no. It's like, do you get what I'm saying? People are so
Yeah.
scared, like, what if it clips and we have to re-record it? And it's like, then
Yeah.
you re-record it.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah, a red line is a red line, like so what? Like
Yeah.
and and sometimes like there are moments where maybe something does clip and you're like, yeah, but the energy of this sounds really good, and like I'm not actually hearing audible distortion in what happened. I've
Yeah.
had times where that happened, and I still kept the recording, and I'm sure there's a ton of people that are gonna freak out about that, but like it, it's true. Like you're making music, you're not worrying about all the meterings and the
Yeah.
numbers and everything else.
I feel like anything can clip. If the vocal clips for more than a half second, then it's like, okay, let's talk about that. But
Yeah,
anything else in the mix can clip, and if it's just a moment, it doesn't matter.
yeah. Like
Oh no,
if it's not
the bass
audible,
guitar
nothing.
clipped. It's like no one will ever hear that.
Yeah, exactly. I actually had that happen with the bass DI, and like we didn't catch it in the moment. It was a long day, and we were just stringing things along. And then later, I was looking, and I was like, "Oh, I noticed in this spot that it was like clipping every single time." And by the time I put it through an impulse response and like, ran an amp sim on it, like you couldn't really tell that it was clipping. It just sounded
Yeah.
like you were hitting the amp super hard. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
I,
And the
I'm
sec
not
this
saying it doesn't matter, but it's not as big of a deal as people
yes.
make of it. Like if you don't hear audible distortion from it or like a loud sound when it
Yeah.
hits, then you're probably okay. Just be careful. Like,
Yeah. And
yeah,
people are also so scared to commit to sounds. I mean, unbelievably scared to commit to sounds. It's like
totally.
it's a good guitar tone. Commit to it. Stop with like spending hours in the mixing stage trying every amp sim you have. It honestly
Hmm.
doesn't matter. Or it's like I record with EQ and compression on the way in with my vocal every time. I just use
Sure.
stock Reaper EQ. I roll off the lows and I get about 60 dB a gain compression. That goes such a long ways when I get to the mixing stage. And it's like,
Hmm.
it's okay. It's okay to commit. It's okay to throw stuff on. It's not going to be the end of the world, but it's almost like this digital world. It's like, oh, I want to not commit to anything. Everything needs to be super dry, have no character at all. And it's like, that's how you create a lame recording.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. Which like, I think it's one of those things of like you cut some of the work out for yourself by like just making quick decisions, and typically the quickest decisions that you make with that stuff are the best.
Hmm.
It's like when you overthink it, or you're like, oh, the guitar didn't have enough low mids, so like, now I'm gonna try to like boost a bunch of like 200 hertz right here in this spot, or or whatever, or you go back and try reamping and everything, and like sometimes it makes a difference, but a lot of the time when people are like, oh, you switched up the guitar tone, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like it matters a lot less than people think, and it's ironic because people spend so much money on guitar plugins, and I've done it myself because I'm a guitar player and I love
Yeah.
different amps and everything, but like none of your listeners typically, unless it's like other people that produce and everything, like your average listener isn't listening and going, oh wow, I really noticed when you changed from like the 5150 to the 5153, like
Yeah.
really big difference. Like
I have,
sure, maybe a bit of a difference, but not that much.
yeah. The difference is knowing the tool. Like I haven't bought any of the Neural DS, none of the new, like I'm behind. Like I'm probably behind to a detriment. Like I still use Bias FX too. Amplitude was new. Yeah, Amplitude 5 was new. I bought that last year. And that one is better. I can tell that some of
Totally.
the amps are better. Um, but it's like really doesn't matter. Like I know the amps and cabs and bias effects too. I know how to get the good sound. So like that's kind of where it ends. Like you just
Yeah.
know how to get the good sound basically. Is how it works. And how they recorded in the 80s and 70s and before digital was because they didn't have plugins, they had to commit to sounds. Like you had to
Yeah.
compress snare drums on the way in. And so people learned those skills. But like now it's like people haven't learned any of those. And so it's like I need to leave everything transparent and then I'll throw on my 7 instances of virtual mix rack and it'll fix everything.
Right. But then also your process takes forever because you run into option paralysis.
Hmm.
Like, if you think about how quick you can dial in a guitar tone and then you can bounce it, like it happens really fast. But if you go back to using real amps and putting a real cabinet on it, like you didn't necessarily have the option to go, I'm going to go through all of this work and find a good spot on the microphone. And then if I don't like it, I'm going to turn the amp on and reamp it and go do it all over again.
Yeah.
Like you could do that, but it would take a lot more of your time. But because it only takes like 30 seconds to flip through some presets, you might find that you're flipping through presets and not actually creating anything. You know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, in the olden days, it's like, all right, we're gonna mic up the Mesa cab. Oh, I don't like that. Let me go grab my orange cab, and it's like that's an effort, to go.
Yeah.
Or let me go grab my Marshall 4x12, and it's like, okay, well, consider even if you had all those cabs, it's like that takes effort to go do all that and move them and plug them in and turn them on and all that stuff.
Right. Which like if you have days to do that, then that's cool. But most people just get stuck in the option paralysis thing, and they don't know exactly what they're trying to go for with their sound. Like they've got it in their head, but they don't really know how to get it. And so,
Yeah.
like what you've done is you just click through a bunch of presets, and then like you got discouraged and just kind of
Yeah.
stopped making music.
You're totally right. Sometimes people they don't know what they want, and that's actually the biggest problem. It's like when I'm
Yeah.
recording my own stuff or whatever, it's like I know what I'm going for. So it's just a matter of, finding the hidden treasure and digging it up. But some people are like they're on the island, they're like I'm not even sure what my guitar tone should be. And it's like, well, that's problem one. It's like you're never going to get a good guitar tone if you don't know what that is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you get through presets, and you might think that the issue is that you need this amp sim or this amp sim, and then you go spend more money, and it's like, well, I flipped through all those presets and I found this one that I kind of liked, but then I thought that it needed a little bit more of the low mids, or I thought it needed some more highs, but then after that I thought it was too harsh when I listened back later, and like
Yeah.
it just turns into a never-ending game. And so like I think a lot of producers, like they're kind of their own worst enemy. Um, like I've had that happen with mixes where like the mixes that I've taken the longest on, like I wasn't as happy with, but the mixes that I've been the happiest with are the ones that I just like popped in and out,
Yeah.
and like mixed it in like 8 hours or 16 hours or whatever. Like those are the ones that I've been the most happy about because I didn't second guess myself and go back and do it again and do it again.
I think people will
I
be
just had a
surprised
creative process the
surprised
entire
how
time.
old some of the plugins are that some of these like amazing mix engineers use. It's like they don't have the
Yeah.
latest this thing and that. I mean, you're still using a second gen interface,
Yeah.
I'm sort of using a Focusrite Solo. It's like you just kind of know it works. You know how to get a good sound from it, and that's kind of all that matters. It's like some of these guys. Oh, your mic went off. Let's see.
Oh, sorry. Dogs are barking, so I just thought I would
Oh, okay, okay. So,
for you.
no problem, no problem.
Yeah. Can you hear them? Or
Barely. I think you're okay. Yeah, no, not anymore.
okay.
No, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if like Zoom
Okay.
turned you off or like what happened, but anyways, I was just like some of these engineers are using 10-year-old plugins or like Pro Tools that's 6 years old. Um, I don't know what DAW you actually use. What do you use now?
I use Studio One 6. Um,
Okay, so you're Studio
so
One.
I
Okay.
yeah, I continued to stay on it just because it's what I know. I've done a couple mixes in Pro Tools, but I just found that I was so much slower with Pro Tools because I don't know it like I do Studio One, and
It's okay. You can say it.
I
Pro
kind of
Tools
just had to
sucks.
make
It's
a
okay.
decision.
The Pro Tools is horrible.
I I really liked mixing it, but like figuring out just the configurations and remembering all the key commands and everything, it was very like draining for me,
Yeah.
to like to be able to zip around in my DAW and then get there and like not really know my way around it was really frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I really like that with Pro Tools, if you have a mix template, you can select all of the tracks and it will import them automatically to the proper channels.
Yeah. That's nice.
I have to drag in each track one by one
Mm.
with what I do. So
Sure,
it's a bit
sure.
more time consuming with the mix prep. Good setup, like by any means. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. No,
yeah.
you gotta, it's like, you've had productions where you're like, I don't like this thing, and it happened early on, and it just keeps like seeping into the next stage. And you're like, you know what?
Yeah,
If I would just gone back and fixed that earlier, I wouldn't have had to throw in these 17 plugins on this bus to fix it.
right. And it's easy to get to that point of like, oh, I just need to like do more in post, and like what you can do in like 8 plugins, you could probably do in 4, and you would get less issues from doing it too.
Exactly.
Like at the end of the day, like if you want to throw a bunch of paint at something, like I guess you can, but your canvas is gonna get in worse and worse shape the more that
Yeah.
you do it.
And there are times for that. There's the times where like you just have the weird track, it just needs all this treatment. I mean,
Yeah.
it happens. But like as like if you're doing that on everything, that's a problem.
Oh yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. That's when it's not just a track problem. That's when it's like a you problem.
It's a you problem. The hard truth.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Well, that was awesome. Thanks for that mix breakdown. I'm not going to
Yeah.
take up too much of your time, but this is great to have you on. My listeners were going to get a lot out of this too. Um,
I'm glad
just
I loved getting to do this, man. Like it was really fun.
awesome.
I always love
Well,
getting to talk shop about this stuff.
awesome. Well, if you're up for it, maybe I'll have you on for more. You can do lessons or things like that if you'd like.
Yeah.
Where do you want to send people? Like send them to your band, your website. Just go ahead. This is where you can kind of just talk about that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I've got a website and it's nickburgessrecordings.com.
Okay.
So like people can book there or whatever. Um, and I've got my portfolio on a Spotify there where like people can, hear what I've worked on. And yeah, if you like the track that you heard, that's Dark Harbor, and that's where I sing and scream and produce and all that stuff. So you can check that out. And we have an EP on the way pretty soon. So I think probably
Okay,
like
awesome.
in a few months we should be releasing the first single. So
Okay. Well, maybe when
yeah.
that singles comes out, you can come back on. You can show us that mix then.
Oh yeah. Well, Jordan mixed that one. So
Oh, that's right. Okay.
yeah.
Well then you have to get
Yeah.
Jordan on. No, I'm kidding. No. Perfect. No, okay. Anyway. Well, that's cool. That's yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Go check out Nick at all those links down there and check out his, if you want to work with him and stuff like that. He's got a great portfolio. I've listened to it. It's all great sounding stuff. So thanks for coming on. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Yeah, that sounds great. Cool. Thanks for having me, man.